Hi everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Commerce Meets Law, a podcast we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. Today's episode is one of my favourites because it is a throwback to the very first episode of this podcast, the first episode which documented the experiences of the finalists and the winners of the commercial awareness competition hosted by Aspiring Solicitors back in 2022. Today's episode is an updated version of that with the CAC winners and finalists for 2024, which also means that this podcast now has been running for 2 years. And I think that in order to celebrate that, I really thought this would be the best way to do it. I also wanted to do this episode as a way of encouraging more people to enter this competition because it truly is just such a life-changing opportunity. And, it's been for me, and I know it has been for the winners of this year, and not just this year, but so many previous years. And so hopefully this episode can give you that extra push that you need to enter this competition next year. If you have ever benefited from Commerce Meets Law, it is all thanks to Aspiring Solicitors hosting this competition. I wouldn't have, started this without that competition really changing the game for me. So I really hope that you listen to this entire episode and that you find it really, really useful. This episode features Shana Ranjan, Kevin Tu, Daniel Guthrie, Samuel Rackind, Fatima and Ep20, who were all part of the CAC final this year. Each of them have recorded a response to these 5 questions, which I thought would best sum up their experience and also allow them to give their best tips for future applicants. So the questions are as follows. Starting with a quick introduction to each person, then why they entered the competition, what they enjoyed most about the process and what they found most rewarding, what resources they used to prepare, and finally, one key piece of advice that they have for future entrants. Just a quick request before we get into the conversation. I'd really appreciate if you could give this podcast a follow and a rating on Spotify. The higher the better, as it really helps Commerce Meets Law reach more listeners. Without further ado, I really hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll see you right at the end.
My name is Shana. I'm one of the winners of this year's commercial awareness competition, and I recently graduated from King's College London, where I studied law. I entered this competition for 3 reasons. Firstly, I was looking for some motivation. I knew that competitions really got me motivated, and commercial awareness really isn't a habit that I had. You could not get me to read the FT unless I absolutely had to, so I thought this was a nice way of getting into it. Secondly, I wanted to test my commercial awareness and see how good or bad my understanding of the business world was. And thirdly, the prizes sounded quite nice. So 90% of the finalists went on to get a training contract, and the winners got a few vacation schemes. So this was quite far off for me at the time. I barely thought I would even make it to the quarterfinals, but there was a teeny part of me that thought, wouldn't it be nice if I did? What I enjoyed the most about the competition, firstly, was the business strategy element of it. So especially in the finals, we were really able to step into the shoes of businesses as its board of directors, for example, giving a presentation to shareholders. And we were able to propose business solutions, which I thought was really, really fun. In our second task, we were given a company to follow, and we could be asked anything about it, which I thought was also so fun, especially because I picked a company that I really enjoyed reading about. So I would have actually been happy to stand up there for an hour and be grilled about it as if I was one of its management team. Our third task as well, we got a company that we really knew nothing about or had barely heard of. And in fact, it was a tobacco company, and we were like, how are we going to advertise something that you're not allowed to advertise? So the way that we came up with out-of-the-box solutions was so fun as a team. I think that was really enjoyable. And also definitely the people that I got to meet. It can be so isolating to sit and write applications. I think being in an environment where you're surrounded by people that are smart, doing the same thing as you with similar goals, and also just really supportive and fun to work with. It was definitely one of the most enjoyable things. What I found the most rewarding about this competition was probably the confidence that you gain from it. I think it really helps shed the imposter syndrome that you don't belong here or that plenty of people are more knowledgeable than you are. Because with each stage that you get through, when you get that email, you really surprise yourself and you gain more and more confidence to think, I've come this far, this is where I'm meant to be, this is the right career for me. And I think that is so very important. The resources that I used to prepare for this competition were podcasts and newsletters, but before I go on to naming them, I think what's important and what carried me through the competition was making them a part of my daily routine somehow. So podcasts, for instance, I listened to them whenever I was on the go. I listened to them when I woke up, when I brushed my teeth, when I went to get groceries. And so that became a way of picking up the news really easily and also hearing the journalists talk about it, so you kind of get more comfortable with the language itself. I think FT News Briefing is great because it's 10 minutes, it picks up the key issues for that day and explains it really well. So definitely try to listen to the FT News Briefing every day. If you like podcasts, I'd also recommend Behind the Money. Wake Up to Money was quite relevant to the competition. You can also just listen to podcasts that you enjoy, which may not necessarily be news, but can still teach you about business strategy. For instance, Business Wars or Good Bad Billionaire. Those were really fun. I was going pretty crazy in the later part of the competition. I was listening to Goldman Sachs and Bloomberg podcasts as well. I think that was helpful because it's so high level, and if you're able to understand that, you're going to be really confident about walking into the competition. I also think newsletters are great. Finimize is definitely a recommendation. It's only a 3-minute daily newsletter, which again drills down to the key things, is quite witty, explains things well. I also used widgets of the Financial Times, FT, and Wall Street Journal, WSJ apps. So basically whenever I opened my phone, I would see the latest headlines. So I think subscribing to at least 1 or 2 newsletters that you like and customizing your feed to the topics that you like is really helpful. One key piece of advice that I have for future entrants is probably to be nice and have fun. They are really looking for people that they want to work with, not people who are competing against each other or trying to get one over their teammates. That's a big no-no. Teamwork really, really comes across in the judging because firstly, the judges will pick up on any mismatch in the team as a whole. And secondly, they will also look at a team which is strong as a whole, and they will like that. So it will reflect on you. And the best evidence I have of this is that 3 of our winners were actually from the same team. So out of the 5 teams in the final, our team produced 3 winners. So I was lucky to be in a team that worked well together and supported each other, and that meant that we brought the best of each other out. So I would definitely recommend, don't just focus on yourself, focus on how each of your team members can do their best, and that's really going to show. And also just have fun, because this really is such a fun competition. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be remembering it for many, many years to come. So enjoy yourself and be nice to everyone.
Hi, I'm Kevin, and I'm a second-year law student at Cambridge, and I'm one of the winners of the commercial awareness competition this year. So just briefly about me. So I was born in China before moving to the UK, aged 4, And I spent a few years living in Manchester before moving on to Liverpool. And I think there were probably two main reasons why I decided to join the commercial awareness competition. So firstly, it was my first vacation scheme application cycle. And so I really just wanted to get an idea of where I was at with my commercial awareness skills and how I could improve. And I think the competition definitely helped me with that because there is quite a large gap between just knowing about commercial issues and then actually going on to talk about and analyze those issues. And the second part for me was the fact that I wanted to improve my public speaking skills and, more importantly for me, my confidence. And I think this was just a great way to do that because this way testing my skills and also being able to catch on to tips and tricks from others and learning from those tasks. I think it really helped me to build my own self-confidence and also to help me develop my personal style of presentation skills. And so for me, that was a really, really worthwhile thing. And as for my most enjoyable and rewarding experiences, I think the most enjoyable moments were definitely meeting other people. I think everyone else there was in the same situation as you, and everyone was just so supportive and friendly and collaborative that it really made what I think would otherwise have been a pretty nerve-wracking and competitive process into one that was much more engaging and much more fun. And I think that atmosphere and that environment was really conducive to collaboration. And so it was great to just be able to work with us to pitch ideas and to be able to build on each other's ideas. And I think that was something that was really apparent throughout the process as we'd each pick up on certain questions or support other points that other people had raised. And I think the most challenging, well, the most rewarding part of the competition came through the most challenging tasks. In task 3 of the finals, my team were given a company which we knew absolutely nothing about. And I think it was quite a difficult company to devise a strategy on. And so it really tested our thinking and our knowledge. And it really required quite a creative strategy, which we basically had to come up with on the spot. And it was just so satisfying to see that that creative strategy had paid off and that we'd been able to work together to deliver a really satisfying outcome. And then moving on to research and preparation, I relied quite heavily on both the FT and on articles and insights from law firm web pages. So I think especially for the latter, it's genuinely really, really helpful to get an understanding of the major sector trends, the major deals, and the actual impacts of regulatory and geopolitical changes on certain sectors. And what's really helpful about those is that they kind of give you an insight into how a law firm would respond and how law firms actually use commercial awareness in practice. And so it's a really good way to get an idea of how you should be presenting as well. And I think adding on to that, really any source works, whether that's a newsletter or a podcast, or whatever helps you to be engaged with commercial awareness. But more importantly, commercial awareness is a long-term process, and it's not something you can pick up immediately. So it's really important to just be able to sustain it. And adding on to that is that you also really need depth of analysis, and that's what makes your answers to questions stand out. When it comes to questions like how does a business operate, how does a business finance itself, how does an M&A transaction work, things like that really help you to apply your understanding of commercial issues, and that's what takes your answer to the next level. And I think a really good introductory book on that is called All You Need to Know About the City by Christopher Stokes. Although I'm sure if you look online, there are plenty of resources that will help you with that as well. I'd say one core piece of advice I have for everyone, and this applies not just for competition, but also for assessment centers and interviews in general, is that you absolutely need to be clear and concise. So you need to be able to maintain a focus on the question, and you need to be able to analyze the question in depth. And so it's important that you don't stray from a question and that you frame your answer in a way that's both easy to understand and easy to follow. And I appreciate that that can be a really hard thing to accomplish, but it is just really important that you take some time to think rather than to rush through or to take too long and spend too long losing your audience and talking about things which aren't perhaps most relevant.
Hi, so I'm Daniel. I competed in the final this year of the Commercial Awareness competition. I just graduated from LSE, where I studied anthropology and law, and I chose to enter the competition because I thought it would help me highlight any gaps in my knowledge if I was going through that first stage and I was like, oh, I don't know what the difference between a warranty and an indemnity is, or something like that. It would give me something to focus on, something to work on. I also thought, should I progress to the later stages, which I really didn't anticipate doing, it would be quite a good opportunity for me to show my suitability for a legal career in a very different way to how you're normally assessed. Normally you won't do something comparable to what you're doing in the quarterfinals or in the semi-finals until an assessment centre. And I thought my skills were sort of maybe more geared towards that, and I knew how to perform well better in that sort of situation than I necessarily knew how to do on a written application, which is a real mixture of art and science, a written application. So the parts of the competition I enjoyed the most, I'd say the first one was the quality of the finalists. Everyone was exceptional, the winners especially, but anyone could have won without meaning any disrespect to them. Everyone was just very, very strong and exceptionally good at presenting, at analysing these issues, at providing creative, innovative solutions, answering some really tough technical questions on the fly, asked by partners at law firms who are not pulling any punches. The other part of it I enjoyed the most was just how tailored it felt. Everyone from the graduate team knew your name. I got on really well with the people at Skadden, where I did my semi-final, and they came up to me and said hi. And the people in Aspiring Solicitors as well, were making jokes about things that I had said to them over the phone, and just sort of really made it a personal experience. Even if you didn't win, which I didn't, it still felt like I'd gained so much just from being there, and I'm still immensely grateful to Aspiring Solicitors. Onto how I prepared and what resources I used, I think the ones you'll commonly hear will be the FT Daily Briefing, reading articles in the FT or the Economist. I would just add on to that the Bloomberg Daybreak podcast. It's a slightly higher level than the Daily Briefing is, but it's very good, and it really gives you a good amount of insight. But I think just as important as what resources you use, or almost more important, is how you use them. So when you're listening to these podcasts, pause them and think about the commercial implications of these stories. Put yourself in the position of, well, if I'm a CEO in this industry, how is this going to affect my outlook in how's this going to affect my 12-month, my 24-month strategy? What does this speak to as a broader trend in the industry that I need to be aware of? I think thinking about it like that prepares you a lot better for success in the later stages. Similarly, when you're reading articles, break them down in sort of 5 key points, and then break them down into 3 sub-issues for each of those points. That's what I did, because you'll be in groups of 5, and normally you only really have enough time to touch on 3 points, so it means you get used to analysing issues in that way. And then a key piece of advice would be, don't get caught up in the prize. Obviously the prize is exceptional and is a huge focus, but at the end of the day you have to go out there and perform as best you can on the day. And if all you're thinking about is, well, if I need to perform here so that I can get a VAC scheme, you find it a lot harder rather than just thinking, well, I need to go out here and showcase my best self and showcase my talent and my applicability for a legal career. So many of the finalists don't win, most of the finalists don't win, but most of the finalists get training contracts. So it's really more so about showcasing your best self than it is about winning. I also think as part of that, you are a team. It is an individual competition, but you are a team. And I think for the past 2 years, in both years, 3 of the winners have been on the same team of 5. And I think, at least in the year that I did it, that team did show a real cohesion in their presenting. So I think don't be selfish with points. Make sure everyone knows what's being said and the structure of things going when you're going up there. It's similar to law. Everyone has a billable hours target and everyone wants to have their name put on the work. But if you can't work in a team to bring that deal together, then it doesn't matter how good you are individually. And if anyone who's listening to this wants to get in touch with me, please find me on LinkedIn, message me on there if you want any advice for this, and I'd be really happy to have a call with you.
My name is Sam. I am one of the Commercial Awareness Competition 2024 winners. I graduated from Durham Uni in 2022, where I studied philosophy and politics, and I really loved it. After graduating, I took a year out. I went to teach English abroad in Colombia for under half a year. I then came home, I worked at the pub for a bit, and I then worked as a paralegal in-house in a FTSE 250 company for a few months before starting my law conversion in 2023, September. Why did I enter the competition? Well, when I heard about the commercial awareness competition, it was quite an unfamiliar concept to me. I didn't really understand what exactly commercial awareness was and how you could assess it. But I knew that I enjoyed reading about business. I enjoy reading the FT, and I wanted to test out if my business understanding was any good and if it was up to scratch for a career in commercial law. I also joined because, to a certain degree, I think it's fun to compete. I think when you compete, you push yourself to be the best version of yourself, but also you learn a lot from your competitors. And I think everyone can benefit from healthy competition. I also entered because I knew that there were vacation scheme offers at stake, so I thought, why not give it a shot and see what happens. Now, the first year I entered in 2023, I actually got to the semi-final. I didn't get through to the final because in the afternoon exercise, I froze slightly and didn't really answer many questions. So as a result, I didn't get to the final. I was slightly annoyed, but I was lucky that summer anyway, which was this past summer, to secure a vacation scheme at Mayor Brown, which I unfortunately did not convert. So this time around when I entered, I was very much in it to win it, not in it to see what it was about. I was very much in it to win it and secure vacation schemes quickly off the back of my summer vacation scheme at Mayor Brown. What did I enjoy most about the process and what did I find most rewarding? Well, first, I really enjoyed the process, the opportunity to think on my feet and to come up with creative and realistic solutions to case studies. That's because the commercial awareness competition, a bit like a Model United Nations, is a simulation. And in a simulation, it can sometimes be a bit difficult to keep the creativity grounded because they're not real companies we're advising on. They're not real case studies. And I think that was very, very enjoyable because everyone has a certain amount of creativity, and it's fun to kind of connect ideas and come up with solutions. But it's even more fun to do that and know that those solutions are actually real solutions that real companies use. And I think that's a real challenge, but it's also a lot of fun to juggle. I also really enjoyed collaborating with my teammates because we would have to work and strategize together towards a common goal. And I think when you're bouncing ideas off of your teammates and they have different angles to different problems and everyone has a lot of diversity of perspective, making a happy marriage out of that diversity is very, very rewarding. You learn a lot in the process. You learn just as much about yourself and your ideas as you do about theirs, and contributing and receiving in a teamwork setting is very fun, very enjoyable. I also found very rewarding spotting opportunities where I could incorporate very naturally my understanding of business news and concepts to answers. And that would enable me to elevate my answer to distinguish it from other competitors. So, for example, in the semi-final and the final, you're actually able to answer someone's question after they've answered it. So I'd very happily spot opportunities where I could chip in after they've answered their question and add to their answer. And while adding to their answer, incorporate a news story that I'd read about or a business concept that is applicable to the situation, but to incorporate it naturally and to make sure it's relevant and direct to the question. That is something that I find extremely rewarding, because I was given the opportunity and the platform to kind of use all the business news reading I was doing, to use it and to make sure it didn't go to waste, which was a lot of fun. What resources did I use to prepare? I would say the FT is your best friend. If you have a university subscription, I would encourage you to sign up to it and to make full use of it. You can follow loads of different news stories on there, and I would encourage you to actually follow specific stories. So, for example, I took an interest in mining, so I'd go to the company section, to the energy section within that, and then to the mining subsection, and I would see everything to do with mining M&A, geopolitical tensions, mining developments in different countries. It was pretty comprehensive, and I think the FT is really good for that, because it covers a huge range of topics in very, very, very strong detail. I would also say that podcasts or commercial law newsletters are really good. Any way really of engaging with business news is a plus, and I would encourage you to do it as much as you can. I would also Google around for legal news websites. I think the Times business section, for example, is very good. Really anything. But commercial law podcasts, newsletters, and the FT, those are your friends. What is one key piece of advice I would give to future entrants? I would say keep it simple. It is very easy, especially when you, in the semi-final and the final, if you only have 1 or 2 minutes to answer your question, to overcrowd it. You don't want to do that. You want to identify 1, 2, maybe 3, no more than 3 key points that you're going to talk about, and you want to make sure that you explain them well, in detail, and compellingly. You don't want to overcrowd your answer by including too much detail and including too many points. You really want to stick to a few points that are compelling. And if you do that well, you will stand out. It really is just to keep it simple. Don't make it too complicated. Take few points, explain them well, and stand out by doing that. And I promise you, you'll instantly beat maybe a third, perhaps almost half of competitors just by doing that, and by doing it well.
Hi, I'm Fatima. I'm a postgrad law student currently completing a conversion course, and more recently one of the winners of this year's commercial awareness competition. I entered actually at the behest of one of my mentors. So I was a participant in this year's AS Aspire, which is a programme that helps you tackle applications and interviews. So we had a series of webinars and tutorials, and my mentor, Karis, who is an absolute legend, by the way, mentioned pretty much at the end of each session, have you signed up to the commercial awareness competition? So when we had our final session, I thought I should probably sign up to this actually, and then entered. I met such cool individuals who were an absolute joy to work with, and I think there was this real sense of wanting everyone to do well and cheering one another on. So that was an absolute pleasure to be involved in. But more specifically, I think the competition represents a super rare opportunity in that it provides an arena to test out your skills against your peers in a safe space where you have nothing to lose. I think that's something that isn't often found in the professional space. So that is something that I appreciate a lot, having participated in the competition. What I found most rewarding, I would say, was progressing through the competition with people I met early on. So I actually did my semi-final at Baker Mackenzie, and I think out of the 20 of us who competed, 10 of us made it through to the final, which was an absolute joy. And Charlie, who was one of my fellow winners, and myself were actually on the same team at the semi-finals. So seeing people who I'd bonded with and worked really hard with make it through to a super advanced stage was a really rewarding thing to see. So I didn't actually change a massive amount from what I should have been doing anyway to help supplement my applications. So the mandatory FT podcast, the daily reading of the FT, but there were more specific resources such as Lexology, which effectively is a website that provides comprehensive legal updates. You select your practice area that you're interested in, the jurisdiction, and the content that you're being provided with is what is being published and what is actually being used in the industry by the lawyers that are actually in the practice areas. So I found that super helpful, and I like to think it paid off. It may sound a little ridiculous, but I would say enter. I recognise, having lived it myself, that there is quite a significant mental barrier when it comes to these things, where you sort of automatically preclude yourself, or don't think you're eligible, or don't think you're up to it, or at least I did. So I think realising that you can only go upwards, and you can only get better, and you can only gain from the experience, is a massive takeaway for me, and what I would advise others to do. In terms of actual practical advice, I would say start forming the habits as early on as possible. I did quite a lot of last minute cramming, and I think in retrospect, had I had those frameworks and workflows in place from the get-go, I probably would have been able to focus on the finer details of things in a way that I would have found more satisfying. And that's something that I noticed in the people who did well. They were able to be quite technical in an artful way. So yeah, those are my 2 key pieces of advice.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby and I am a graduate from the University of Birmingham, where I study classical literature and civilization. I graduated in 2022 and I currently run a cake business, which I set up during lockdown. So a little bit of an unconventional journey into law, but I'm very grateful to be here and to talk about my opportunities and experience at the CAC. So in terms of why I entered the competition, so I entered it last year and it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. I didn't find it it was enjoyable, but it was just sort of one of those experiences where you kind of know that it's out of your comfort zone, but you kind of push through it anyway. So I progressed to the semis last year, and my mission this year was to progress to the finals. And obviously, I'm happy to say that I achieved that milestone, but that was one of my main goals in entering it. And I just wanted to sort of prove to myself that I could do it, and that the work that I had put in throughout the year was reaping rewards and was sort of demonstrating clear results. So what I enjoyed the most about the process and what I found most rewarding, what I enjoyed most, I enjoyed having a goal to work towards. So the competition is spread throughout a few months, and it was nice to know that there was sort of consistent deadlines to keep my prep tailored to. So I could tailor my preparation in the sense that I tried to do little and often. So every day I try and set aside 30 minutes to an hour to just try and keep up to date with the news. And then I'd create a journal about what I found interesting about that day and how I thought it was relevant to a career in commercial law. And then it was really nice to see how those puzzle pieces, little tidbits of information, fitted together to sort of form a puzzle of the wider legal and commercial landscape. So that was really enjoyable, being able to pick out the trends myself and seeing the pieces fit together. And it's probably one of the most rewarding aspects as well, because I could see my knowledge evolving in tangible ways. In terms of preparation, I tried to read the FT as much as I could. I will not say that I read front to back every single day. I didn't do that. I picked probably 2 stories that I would read in depth, and then I tried to skim bits of it. The Lex column I found really interesting because it provided a perspective on an issue that you might not have thought of, and they're usually quite cleverly written, so I enjoyed reading that. Also, Watson's Daily, I'm sure everyone on this podcast has said that, is a fantastic resource. So they summarise all the news stories from the day and they send it to you in a newsletter, and you can really just skim it. It's also broken down by sector, which I find really useful to keep on top of the sort of industry-specific trends, and was also really useful for the competition. They used to have a podcast as well, which I really enjoyed listening to. I'm not sure if they still do, but if that is available, I would definitely recommend reading that, because for me that was really useful hearing people talk about it. And another one that I actually use, so I really enjoy learning via podcasts. So Another one that I really enjoyed is the Linklaters podcast, and there's a Deckert Committed Capital one, which is all about, it's more specific to private equity, but it's just quite useful for drawing wider trends in. So that was really good. Otherwise, just generally news outlets like BBC News, Sky News, just a lot of it's like, for example, if I was travelling like on the tube or in the car, I would, instead of playing my music, I would listen to a podcast or I'd put the news on. It's just little things like that I think really made the difference for me this time. And yeah, just wrapping up, in terms of key advice for future applicants, I would say that the competition is daunting and it's meant to be challenging. I think every competitor found it a challenge because it's hard. It's meant to be hard. So I think acknowledging that and being aware of it and knowing that it's going to be probably out of your comfort zone, but still doing it anyway, be confident in your abilities and don't try and second guess yourself, and really just don't see the aim of winning, see the aim of that you do your best. It's an amazing opportunity to showcase all your knowledge that you have to a fantastic array of senior people from law firms that you would not have got exposure to, well, most likely, without doing this. And I think also another piece of advice is that commercial awareness is not something that you can cram into a few days. It's accumulated over a period of time. So I think little and often, for me at least, was much better than sitting there for hours and trying to cram it all in. So I think be confident in your abilities, don't second guess yourself, and remember, slow and steady wins the race. But really just do it. It's a fantastic opportunity and I would really recommend it to anyone. Also, another small point is that if you can survive the competition, it's going to be 100 times harder than any assessment centre you will have to do. So you can therefore go into future assessment centres with great confidence because you know that you've been able to pass the hardest hurdle.
And on that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a huge shout out to Shana, Kevin, Daniel, Samuel, Fatima and Abby for taking out the time to record your responses. I really, really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode and gained any value from it, please do let me know by emailing commercemeetslaw@gmail.com or with a DM on Instagram at commercemeetslaw. And for extra summer content, do check out the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel, where all these podcast episodes are also uploaded, and our TikTok, where you can find short form content from Commerce Meets Law. For now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.